what were your hopes in writing a memoir? I mean, it's such a rare thing for a Latina to publish a memoir. I mean, I could count on my one hand the amount of memoirs that I've read by Latinas. And so it's very special and it's very exciting. And so I would like to hear from you what you were hoping to achieve through this book.
So actually, I was a professor at DePaul when the idea came for this book. I probably shared it with my students because I'm super, super open with my students. And what happened was, this was not the book that I was going to write. This was definitely not the book that I sought out to write. As you know, Erika, writing a book is really hard and it's a particular challenge. You know, intellectually, psychologically, spiritually, it's a lot. I mean, you've had extraordinary success, and that's also another challenge, right? But it can be a very, very lonely thing. So I wasn't really looking to write another book, but I was on MSNBC one night in 2016, and I said something to somebody. I said, "There's no such thing as an illegal human being. Illegal is not a noun." And that moment went viral. And so then like 10 million people saw it. And the chair of my board of my nonprofit said, you know, you need to write that book. Illegal is not a noun. And I said, that's a great idea. I can write a little pocket book like Chimamanda Adichie, We Are All Feminists. And it will be at the airport, because I used to live at the airport, of course.
Me too.
We used to live in airports, right? So I was like, you know, it'll be at the airport, it'll be in the bookstores, and it'll be that little book that you can, the pocket book that you can just take, and I'll explain quickly and succinctly why illegal is not a noun and give a kind. So I was like, that's it. But, you know, I had to, by now my agent had retired. I had to find a new agent, and that took a long time. And then just kind of talking out what I wanted to do. And so we did, we tried to get that book out there. And no one was interested in that book.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I really was like, but no. And I like to talk about the publishing industry also. And I also like people to know that my first proposals got rejected. You know, I think they got rejected while I was a professor at DePaul. I probably talked about it. So, but what did end up happening was that there was this other conversation with people as you're, you know, moving along in this process. And it was kind of like, you know, would you consider writing more of a memoir? But it's got to be a bigger story than but rather it's got to be kind of a bigger idea with, you know, doing some history. And I was like, oh, I think I can do that. And Michelle Herrera Mulligan from Chicago,
He's great.
Mexican Irish from Chicago, you know, by now had just taken a job at Simon & Schuster. She knows my work, and she, you know, then this proposal that we wrote actually got traction, and it went to auction, and Michelle really pitched for it. I felt the love that she had for this idea that we had. And it was Michelle. And by the way, this was a painful process. I was talking about the writing, the actual, like how the sausage is made today with my students here at Barnard. And, you know, Michelle did have this really amazing idea. She was like, we need to make sure that we're putting the history as you're writing about not only your life in journalism, becoming a journalist, but also your life as a woman, as a feminist, as a rape survivor who wants to talk about this, and sexuality. I mean, that's how you and I first connect, when you're a sex columnist for Vogue Latina. Yeah. So, you know, so it was not just the immigrant, not that that's bad. I mean, obviously that's really important, but in that sense, Michelle said, we're going to put a lot of, I call it spinach, because it's like, you know, it's supposed to be good for you. And so maybe you think it's going to taste bad, but it's like the best tasting spinach that you get, like when you go to an Italian restaurant, and it's like that perfect spinach with garlic and olive oil. That's how Once I Was You was born. And I don't know about you, but I didn't have a title. we suffered with this title.
It's a great title.
I love the title now.
Yeah.
We did not, we suffered. I cannot tell you.
Titles are very difficult. I mean, how do you summarize so much? You know, it's very hard.
It was really hard, but the title comes from the introduction, which I went back and wrote after I had finished the book, and it really worked so well. And people are really, what I love, Erika, because I haven't had this experience, you have much more experience, is like suddenly your book is out there and people are like reading it and they're relating to it, and you're just like, are you kidding? Really? So I'm in that stage of the process.
Yeah, it's such an exciting thing. I mean, I think women like us in many ways grow up feeling pretty alienated, from what I could gather from your story, and just different, and we feel like people don't understand us, and then you read a book that shows you the opposite, that someone completely understands you, and that's what I found so comforting about the book, and many other amazing things that you achieved through it, but that connection that I had as a Mexican American woman, it was just so great to be able to feel that sort of camaraderie. Aww. And yeah, and also the way you write about sexuality and surviving rape is just really incredible and really brave. The honesty in which you approach these subjects. I think it's such a still taboo subject to talk about, like female desire, right? And you talk about that as a young woman, like coming of age and wanting to express yourself sexually, and then having this like really traumatic moment and not even understanding what it was at the time. And I think for many of us, we grow up thinking that being violated by men is almost part of being a woman, a young woman, a girl, part of girlhood. And, you know, how bizarre is that we just kind of accept that as a culture. And I love that you tackle that issue and that you're able to make sense of it, or not make sense of it, but like create something from it, because it was such a painful experience. And this book is going to help so many people. And so could you tell me a little bit about that process, about like delving into these like very, very difficult topics, and how you were able to do that and take care of yourself as you were writing the book? Because I know how traumatic it is to write.
So actually the only time that one of the times that I remember really crying was when I had to write that scene of what happened. Mm-hmm. But what I didn't set out to do that.
Yeah.
I really didn't, but something happened in the process of all of this. Well, it was actually the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh and Dr. Christine Blasey Ford. And prior to that, I had been doing some therapy because it was coming up. It was, this thing was rearing its head in my life as a human being, as a woman. When I started writing, so really early on, is when I realized that me talking about my life as a Mexican girl growing up on the south side of Chicago and wanting to be the American girl involved the question of sex and sexuality. And it was a very binary thing, you know, entre mi familia, like my mom, my dad, like it was like, no. Mm-hmm. No, okay, what? O sea, maybe you can say that you have a boyfriend. Ay, qué lindo, tiene novio. But that was it. And then meanwhile, over here, like in high school, it's like all of the American girls there's this whole other thing that's going on. And this competition, again, I say I was in a competition that they didn't even know that they were competing with me. It was this crazy thing. So I was writing about that in the book as a, you know, remembering this. And then I realized, es que this happened when I was 16. So I was a little girl when this happened. And so it really was a part of my formation. And I couldn't just like skip over that. Look, I don't know about you, Erika, but I ended up, I was insanely disciplined on this. And so I wrote nonstop for multiple months, and I ended up producing an extra 100,000 words.
Oh my God.
Yeah, I know. It was ridiculous. It was crazy. But, you know, that was kind of my trauma of like, I'm not good enough. I'll never write enough. So I have to, you know, so I'm like, anyway, so a lot of what ended up getting cut was actually an entire relationship that I had that was like the Diego Rivera, Frida Kahlo relationship, very traumatic, all went on the way. And so a lot of this was connected into that bad, I was making some bad relationship decisions. There was a lot more of that in it, but Michelle is a phenomenal editor. And when she told me we got to cut 100,000 words and I was crying and everything, she was like, don't worry, I'm going to do surgical. And so she kept certain things and other things just completely left. And one of the things that was there was the rape and my understanding of it and coming to terms with it as an American woman, where also the whole question of sex and sexuality as a Mexican woman was a central part of my conversation. And then the beautiful moment, I think, for me, and I love talking about this, which is there is hope. I found an amazing therapist who specializes in sexual trauma and people who have been sex trafficked. I met her interviewing her, and she is my therapist, and my husband and I have done therapy. And so coming to terms with desire, with, in this case, an older woman's desire who has no tengo pena, even though my kids are like, stop it.
You're a cool mom.
They're like, stop, don't talk about this. But I wanted to start a sex show. I think I talked about this when I was teaching at DePaul. I am committed. I'm going to start a sex show. Obviously, you'll be a guest, Erika.
Oh, I love it.
We put it on the back burner because it was coming up just when the murder of George Floyd. And so we just felt like not right now. But I do want to talk publicly about Latina sexual desire, so that we're not, and this is like what I found fascinating about you was that you were doing this work really openly. And I feel like it's really important because all women, but Latinas in particular have got a thing and we need to talk about it. And so that's a big reason why I'm really happy that Michelle did not cut that part out, because it is a really important part of my story and of my healing.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I love that you talk about therapy so openly. I think it's so important that in our communities, we discuss our mental health, mental illness. It's something that continues to be taboo and stigmatized, which is really unfortunate. So I think this book really helps break down those kinds of barriers, and it shows people how important it is to seek help. That mental illness is not a choice. You talk a lot about PTSD, and no one signs up to have a mental illness or to experience trauma. And so I feel that books like yours help people understand what it is and how to cope with it. And so, could you tell me about the work that you've done about mental health and Latinas? We've talked about this at length as well. Just, our suicide rates are incredibly high. Latina teens in particular, among their peers, have the highest rates. So what do you hope that this book does? What kind of conversations do you hope this book creates in our communities in terms of mental health?
So I remember actually having early meetings with my boss, Lourdes Torres, who I know is watching. So yes, Lourdes, I'm shouting you out. And I love calling Lourdes my jefa because she's just like, what? But I remember telling her very early on, Lourdes, I want to teach a class about Latinas' mental health and depression, because those statistics as a journalist just always stuck with me. And, my family, we ended up doing therapy as a family pretty early as a Mexican family in Chicago, because lo que pasó fue que my mom and dad got married. My mom was 17. My dad was 24, 25. So when my dad marries my mom, it is very much a traditional marriage, and she was cool with that. Except that then, they end up moving to the United States. And she's like, wait a second, like there's a women's movement going on. Like, wait a second, there's feminists everywhere. What is this? Women are burning their bras. Maybe I don't want to do that. And to make a long story short, mom basically wants to start working and doing work. And so This creates a big rift in our family. It is the thing that almost divides my family, is the fact that my mom wants to work outside of the home. And my mom actively makes a decision. My father was having a hard time, and she said, well, if he won't do therapy, I'm going to do it. And so as a family, we experienced family therapy. It was the thing that kept my mom and dad's marriage together.
Wow.
And they stayed married until my dad passed away in 2015. So that was like 60 years mess.
Wow.
Yeah, it was deep. And so as a young woman, I remember doing therapy. I remember one of the exercises we did in family therapy was, and our therapist was Russian born. And she said, you know, write about the happiest moments that you have as a family. And we all ended up, draw. We all ended up drawing the times when we were together going to Mexico in the car, all 6 of us driving. So I very early on understood that there was no stigma for me in therapy. And I'm very public about it on In the Thick and on Latino USA, more so on In the Thick because it's a weekly talk show. Precisely because I want to make sure that es que no hay pena. And let me tell you something that I've said publicly now several times and will continue to say. I don't think it's going to be any good for me to try to get the interview with Joe Biden if I keep saying this, but I have said, one, this is his moment to say that they need to shut down all of these detention facilities immediately because of these forced hysterectomies, right? Like, this is your moment to say that. But also to say that he's going to begin the immediate reunification of families, and that there will be provided free mental health for the entirety of their lives. For all of those immigrants who have experienced any of this kind of trauma in this, what we've been living through, free mental health. So I'm very worried about the kind of trauma that we're about to experience and live through in this country because of what's happening now. And so, yeah, I want to talk about mental health because it's going to be, and Latinos and Latinas and other immigrant groups are going to be central to this. It's going to be super important. So I remember so many of my students saying, you know, I want to do social work. So I encourage them to move forward in that and continue in that. And maybe psychology, maybe psychiatry, clinical social work, we're going to need it desperately.
Yeah, I mean, there's just not enough mental health professionals who have like the cultural competency to like really understand our communities, and that's really unfortunate. Just like searching for a therapist for my mother who speaks Spanish, I mean, that's been a challenge, you know, and so yeah, I hope that there's a new generation of young mental health professionals who are able to speak to the issues that are very specific to our communities. And speaking of detention centers, you know, I have read many reports, articles about these centers, and it wasn't until I read this book that I mean, I've always been horrified, but I think this book really put it into perspective for me. The details that you include, like the rotten food, how incredibly cold it is, how people don't have soap. I'm just so angry all the time. And so it's the detention centers, it's the racial violence, there's, you know, the pandemic, there's just so much. How do you cope with all of that knowledge that you have, with all of the anger that you carry? Because I know that you must be angry. I surely am, and I'm having a really hard time right now. Like, I don't know how to express it. I don't know how to cope with it. I'm having a baby, and I'm just like, what am I gonna do? You know, if Trump is reelected, et cetera. And so, if you could,
So
yeah, talk a little bit about that.
it's interesting. I do practice self-care. Like, I didn't really understand that. And self-care sometimes means disconnecting entirely. It does. We need to understand context. What's happening right now, this horror, because Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, you know, Steve Bannon, all of them have intensified the horror and the torture and the violence and the hatred Absolutely. But that is built on the shoulders of Democrats and Republicans.
Right.
It just is. And that the Democrats and Republicans who built this up have been doing this for decades. It's not new. You know, the first people who are excluded by law from this country are Asian women, Chinese women. Then they do the Chinese Exclusion Act. And so then you have to understand, okay, I have to be able to understand that you, Erika, for example, and the young people who are watching this and those of us who are older, we have to be fighting against this every single day of our lives for the rest of our lives. And hopefully we'll be able to deconstruct it, because why isn't Joe Biden saying that? Why isn't he saying that? So that means we're going to have work to do. Let's assume he gets elected, which is still iffy, mostly because he hasn't gone after the Latino-Latina vote, but okay. Mm-hmm. Let's just say he does win. We are going to have to continue to press this. So I hope, Erika, that you, I wake up the same way as you. Every morning I'm just like, no puede ser, es que no puede ser.
It just keeps getting worse and worse.
Es que no puede ser, es que no puede ser. And there are so many horrors that are happening that we can't talk about. Like one of the things that I've been saying, and I say this, by the way, I don't have proof right now because I can't, because that's part of the plan. How am I going to speak to an infant or a toddler and have them tell me the story of how they were sexually molested or abused or raped in an immigrant detention facility? How am I going to get that story? They'll deport that child, and that child doesn't have, I will never see that child. I don't have access to that child because they're held in privately run detention facilities. That is happening now. I have been talking about the consistent rape of women and men in detention facilities. I've been talking about that since 2011 when I did the Frontline, which was the basis of classes that I taught at DePaul. So this is not new. And that means that it is going to take all of us every day doing something to help deconstruct it. But it also means that I can't die in the next 5 years trying to solve this. I have to do what I do, which is to tell these stories that are heartbreaking. My phone is getting charged right now over there, but on that phone, I just received 3 missed phone calls from Josue, who is a Honduran refugee who just made it to Mexico City. He got permission to be in Mexico in part because of the reporting that we did, but he's in Mexico City, he's starving. Like, you know, I'm getting the calls on my phone. Anyway, so we have to understand, okay, I'm doing something. What am I doing? And everybody has to decide on their own what it is that they are doing or talking about or getting other people to do. And then you have to do the self-care. So Lourdes knows this. I meditate like crazy. I started meditating while I was, teaching at DePaul. When I was a beginning professor at DePaul and people would say meditate, I'd be like, you're crazy. Now I'm about to post it, I think tomorrow, 400 days straight on this particular app. 400 days without missing one meditative session. Yeah, I'm super proud. And it's not that hard, by the way. It's 10 minutes in the morning or at night. So please, it's not like, oh my God, she's a yogi. And there's no Zen mind that's empty. It is simply the intention of, I'm going to meditate every day, listening to a meditation and trying to be there for 10 minutes. That's all the meditation is. And then I box. I was thinking this morning, like, I haven't stopped since the morning. And I was boxing at 7 o'clock in the morning. I was like, that's really crazy. Maybe you should have taken an extra hour of sleep this morning. Maybe you should have done a little food prep so you would have been better prepared for today. That's going to go so long because I'm not done. I've got another 2-hour event coming up after this. And I just said, yeah, but you know what? That that going boxing every morning that I do, that's me, man. That's when I'm like not thinking about anything. In fact, today I dedicated my boxing to Breonna Taylor. But it is the space that I'm giving myself. So I know that you're newly married. This is really important for you as a wife. So anybody who has a partner or who considers themselves in a relationship, in a wife type or partner type relationship, you actually got to treat yourself like a queen, girl. You have got to be like, no, I got this. Like, don't you, like, you have got to make whatever it is that you do. I mean, oh my God, I would love a manicure. I haven't had a manicure since March. I'm like, don't even look at my nails. Like, it's really, but if that's the thing that you do that brings you joy, then you got to make sure that you're making that happen every week, because you know what? That's going to make you happy in your house, and that's going to make your partner happy. But if you're running around like, coño, es que no he podido tener tiempo ni para hacerme el manicure. O sea, ¿qué es esto? Entonces you're going to be pissed off all the time, and you're going to make him pissed off. And then eso, not good for any relationship. So then the capacity for us to carve out that space for self-love actually reflects on all of the rest of us. Just so you know, because I'm super honest, I'm already in the process of cleaning the bathtub. After this, I'm going to go lay in the bathtub for an hour. I'm going to run it super hot. I just got my Epsom salt delivered by I don't know who that my son ordered. I've got my Epsom salt, and I'm going to go lay, and I'm going to watch this show that I'm watching on Netflix called Greenleaf that Oprah co-produced. And I'm going to just chill and disconnect and not feel guilty.
Yeah. I feel like, Latina women are not encouraged to do such things. And I'm glad that you're pushing back against that, because we're supposed to take care of everyone all the time and be martyrs. And it's like, no, thank you.
By the way, so I'm describing this scene right now, which is kind of like idyllic, which is like, oh, Maria, oh my God. Last night, I was spitting bullets. I'm like, to myself, I'm like, pero es que, I'm still doing the laundry here. What's this? I'm like, I'm going to be asked to walk the dog, even though I've been working all day. I'm sitting here folding clothes. I'm the one who's got to clean up the cat. So I'm spitting bullets about being a mom. So don't get the illusion that it's like, oh my God, no. And,
sure.
and by the way, women right now under the pandemic, is that a thing? Because we are caretakers, and that, well, not we are, but many of us. Entonces, it is a thing where we are being overworked. So don't get the illusion that she's like, oh my God, she always takes baths in the middle. No, it's because I know that I've got another 2 hours that I've got to just do something. Sure. I got to do something for me.
Yeah, no, that's great. I have another quick question about just like women supporting each other before we jump into the audience questions, which you submit through the chat, please. I really love the way that you celebrate female friendships, relationships, connections, and that you really emphasize how important it is for women to take care of each other. And so could you tell me a little bit about that and how you've come to this point in your life with the help of women?
Yeah, so that was something else that really happened in the writing, is, when you're writing, you really want your audience to connect with a few people. You have so many characters in your life, but you can't connect them in all of the stories. And so early on, my therapist, my first long-term therapist, Andaye, Afro-Puerto Rican from the Bronx here in New York, and she was really helpful in terms of my imposter syndrome. But she also said to me one thing. She said, go, because Herman, my husband, is like, look, I have to be your priority. I'm your partner. And I was a little bit like, don't be a man like that. And this is where I had to work this out, which is actually, he's your friend. He wants to be with you, So we were talking about friendships and women's friendships. And I remember, this was early in my career before I had kids, when I actually had a social life. And Andaye said, so how many close friends do you have? And I was like, oh my God, close friends? Yeah, she was like, how many close friends do you have? And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe 20. And she was like, no, no. And I was like, what do you mean? Isn't that good? And she was like, no, 5. These are people who you are prepared to take a bullet for. And I was like, ooh. And that changed everything for me. And so some of those 5 people end up being, women who are with me, or, who were with me for a very important part of my life. Cecilia Weissman, may she rest in peace. I'm looking at her right now. Her altar is right next to my bed. We're in my bedroom. Cecilia Weissman is the reason why I went to DePaul. My very best friend from here at college, who ends up living in Chicago, ends up becoming a professor. And then she's like, do this, apply for this job. And I was like, why am I going to apply for a job in New York? I'm in Chicago. I live in New York. She was like, do it. And that's how it all starts. Cecilia, who is white Jewish Argentinian, and my dearest friend, may she rest in peace. Sandy Ratley could not be more different than Cecilia. Sandy Ratley is African American, 10 years older than me, the first African American woman to be a vice president at NPR and to lead the national desk at NPR. 3-time Peabody Award-winning woman. Sandy is with me the first time that I have a full-blown panic attack. It was in the writing of this book where I was like, oh, you were having a panic attack. Oh, we didn't have these words. We didn't have these terms. It was the first time I had to write a script, an hour documentary script. And I freaked out. I was throwing up. We went to 5 different restaurants. I threw up in each one. It was a panic attack. And Sandy talked me down. And she has been with me and is, central in my life. My therapist, Cristina, another central, and Andaye. I wanted to do this because, sometimes, no, not sometimes. If you listen to Esther Perel, who is, I believe, born in Belgium, and she's a relationship counselor. She has podcasts and everything. And because she's not American born, she has an outsider perspective. And she says, in the United States, there's this sense that your love relationship has got to be your everything. And she's like, no, your love relationship cannot be your everything, which is why you have your girlfriends, right? So your love relationship is a very special one, but you have to have these other girlfriends. In fact, that creates an independence from your partner that should, in fact, ideally create desire in him for you. Or the fact that your partner has other friends that he can go and be with, or she can go and be with, it should actually make you desire him more, because there's something that maybe you don't know about him and his friends. So this to me was very helpful in understanding that my compañera girlfriends, and I miss them. I think that's what's been hard. And also I lost a couple of my compañera girlfriends. So I've had to actively work at okay, I've got to find another couple of girls who are like my 5. And I'm in the process of doing that when the pandemic happens, and you're not seeing anybody. But I do want to urge, especially as students, you got to find your clan, because if you don't have the role models, then you got to find your peeps who are going to help you figure this out. And some of them may be Latinas and some of them not. So keep that in mind as well, and be open to that experience.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And it is very hard during this time. I just want to hug my friends, and now we're afraid of each other's bodies, and it's just so bizarre. But yeah, it's something that's incredibly important also in my life. And I always tell my students as well to find their people, to find people who love and support them, who they could turn to when things are difficult. And so thank you for
Absolutely
sharing those stories. We have one question so far from the audience, and I'll just go ahead and read it. It says, I love the part in the book when you discuss the question of objectivity and being accused of having a Latina agenda. Can you talk about why it is so important to have journalists from different backgrounds and perspectives reporting our news?
So, yeah, that's been in the entirety of my career. right? It was like, you know, I was looked at circumspect because affirmative action was very much in the conversation. So it was like, but you just hired her because of affirmative action. So that was real. That was very real. Then it was like, oh, she likes to do those kinds of stories. You know, and I could propose stories about whatever, you know, because that's what a journalist does. You actually have to be something of a generalist. You have to be able to report on almost anything. But did I feel like I was able to bring something into the newsroom that no one else had? And isn't that what journalists are supposed to do? Like report on things that are new and different? So I felt really committed to doing that. But there was this moment when I was a new reporter, a new correspondent, and Herman, my husband, whose artwork is behind me and who's just so important in my life. But Herman says that I didn't suffer from PMS. He said I would suffer from PSS, pre-story syndrome, where I would go into like a state of anxiety because I had to write a script for NPR because I was always convinced that I was never good enough. And then this cabron, perdón, but it's true, and he's out there still. I hope he's hearing this story someplace. You know, he actually says to me, we're in the middle, we finished a story edit, and blah, blah, blah. And then he says, oh, come on, Maria, everybody but knows about you and your agenda. I said, my agenda? What are you talking about? Oh, come on, Maria, everybody knows about you and your Latino agenda. And I said, a Latino agenda? I said, well, are you crazy? I said, I don't have a Latino agenda. I said, then you must have a white male agenda. And he said, well, it's not the same thing. I said, it is the same thing. And I was lucky that at that moment, I was able to respond quickly, because most of the time what ends up happening is that when these, not microaggressions, but like real aggressions are dropped, we're like, ugh. So we have to be prepared. We have to be prepared. So we have to be prepared to just in that moment. And that's what I said. I was like, so this marked me. I mean, look, I'm talking about this. This happened when I was 31 or 2. I'm still talking about this because it marked me. And so, you know, it's very interesting. After Donald Trump got elected and after maybe the first year, NPR that used to distribute Latino USA, we no longer are distributed by NPR because we did better. We went to PRX. PRX was the better boyfriend for us. NPR was a little bit like, we're not so into you. But NPR, oh, I forgot what I was going to tell you. Let's see, what was I saying? Oh, well, anyway, I'll come back to it. But yeah, let's leave it there.
Yeah, no, that was great. That moment in the book, I loved that your comeback was so swift and so cutting.
Oh, I know what I was gonna say. I was gonna say that NPR, they used to, for example, when I would go on MSNBC, and inevitably something that I would say would end up on Breitbart News, which is, you know, Breitbart News, and then NPR would be like, oh my God, and something would happen and I'd hear from NPR and they'd say, you know, why did you say that on MSNBC? Kind of like you need to tone it down a little bit, like you need to calm down. They would never exactly say that. Yeah. After, you know, the first 2 years of Donald Trump, they stopped telling me that because con qué derecho?
Right.
Con qué derecho? How are you, as a white male editor, a man who is heterosexual, cis male of privilege, how are you going to tell me that I need to be more objective when covering a presidency that insults every aspect of who I am? You are going to tell me? Me Too had already happened. And so there was just like and by the way, I'll just tell this joke because I'd like to make people laugh because, you know, we can't, otherwise we're just going to cry all the time. So I like to say, you've heard this one because I said it when I was with Sandra Cisneros, you know, that I'm 5 things that this president doesn't like. We know it. I'm Mexican, I'm an immigrant, I'm a journalist, I'm a woman, and I'm flat-chested.
Yeah, I don't think he's a fan of me either, or my family. I think about that a lot, and like having this baby, she will be mixed. My husband is Black and Italian and Mexican, and like we're his worst nightmare. What's happening to America, that we're all mixing and becoming.
Your child is la raza cósmica, yo. Kind of
Yeah,
actually kind of like my children, because my husband is Afro Dominican Taino. Oh,
right.
I don't know if this is public, so don't tweet this out, anybody. Okay, this is a little off the record, but I love DePaul and I'm always dropping things. Don't say anything about this though, but it's not public yet. But soon I will know, in fact, what my roots are. I will know whether or not I am part of La Raza Cósmica, because I'm being featured on Finding Your Roots.
I was about to guess that. Oh my God, that's so cool.
Shh.
I won't
say anything. Don't say anybody. Don't say a word. Okay, I just shared that with
my husband though. I have to, because we love that show.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Next week is my interview. Are you kidding? They booked me the whole day. They're about to drop. Oh my God, I'm so excited.
That's super exciting. That's one of my dreams, to be on that show.
Okay,
it's just
I'll drop it.
Oh, please. By the way.
I mean, look at where, you said you're following in my footsteps. I mean, hello.
I'm trying my best. I would love that. That's so amazing. Great. Okay, so we have only a few minutes left. I'm gonna ask another question from the audience. One is, as writers, how can we discuss sex in a story while distinguishing both the expectations of being a Latina woman and a woman in the US in general? I'm not quite sure what that means, but I have a feeling. Perhaps you understand it better than I do.
How should we discuss sex? Is that what the question was? How should we?
Yeah, how can we discuss sex in a story while distinguishing both the expectations of being a Latina woman and a woman in the US in general? So I guess the different standards that we have.
Right. I mean, you got to go for it. Like, that's part of, like, in the writing of this particular, like, for me, this working out of, as Erika knows, the perfect Mexican daughter, this kind of like, am I? And then kind of the images of Mexican women, I ended up really enjoying the fact that I was like, wait a second. Like, there's a lot of Mexican women that is really about their sexuality, but owning it.
Uh-huh.
And I kind of really got into that. And also, like, then I started thinking about, like, las soldaderas, right? Las Adelitas, who were in the revolution, who were out there being like, hell, were they getting it on? Absolutely. Man, I bet there were some fine Mexican guerrillas who were fighting in the revolution. So, and I just started kind of getting really inspired by Mexican women and because we have that thing where on the one hand, it's like the assumption that we're virginal, but actually, no, not at all. And then there's this other thing, which is that we are more kind of connected to our sensuality in some ways. Like, that's when I was writing this, I was like, wait a second. But the women who I saw that were kind of like flaunting it or getting primed and, all of this, it was the Mexican women. And I was getting that, like, their coqueteria, like, oh, they're, Mexican women. I mean, this kind of coqueteria that can happen in el mercado or in a dinner party, right? And that's when I was like, no, es que Mexican women, there is a lot of, and then part of what ended up happening that was really beautiful is that, I had to talk to my mom and my sister and my brothers about the fact that I'm a rape survivor. My sister and my mother were at the location where it happened. It happened not exactly where we were staying, but on a hill mountaintop. So I had to talk about this. I had to bring up this, and then my mom actually, gotta love the 80s. Gotta love when moms go into their 80s, because my mom she spoke much more freely, and she's never been necessarily prudish, but not as open, and talking about her own sexual desire as a 17-year-old who was about to get married. And she was like, oh my God, are you kidding? I was the one that wanted it. And I'm like, I was like, ¿qué, ma? Pero yo estaba con eso. And she's like, y yo fui la que le enseñé a tu papá todo. And I'm just like,
oh.
And then I'm not going to reveal more. That's already too much. But my mom, and that really helped me when my therapist then helped me to unlock this thing about being a survivor of rape, which is, you know, no, girl, you had every right when you were 16 to be hot for that boy. He was a predator. You didn't know that. In your eyes, he was cute. He was sweet. He was a good dancer. Okay. I mean, yes, our expectations can be really low for men. Okay, I'm just saying. But you were a 16-year-old adolescent, which means that your hormones were popping. You had every right to be hot. Your mother at 16 was hot. And that's why she was like, I got to marry this guy and then I was like, oh, damn. So Mexican women, we do have that. Also, then mom talked a little bit more about like, you know, the sexual abuse. Like, you know, she went to the movie theater at 6-year-old with her with her mother. She went to the bathroom in the middle of the movie and there was a man there that, you know, exposed himself. So, so it's not like it's all beautiful, but I do think that there is a part of our Latin American side of us as women that we should, and that again, I see it often on Instagram, this kind of more sex positive that I'm really, really enjoying right now.
Yeah, no, I love that. And this leads me to my last and final question, which is a little bit silly, but I want to know about your lipstick and what your favorite brand is.
Hold on. What's it called? I can tell you right now because actually, Erika, as you can tell, I'm wearing red lipstick. I've only started wearing red lipstick since I started my virtual tour. So it's only
Really?
2 weeks. I have never liked red lipstick. I've always felt red lipstick looked terrible on me until I tried this. It is, okay, so I'm about to reveal, but you know, I talk like I reveal. So in the beginning, in the introduction, which is a very like intense introduction to the book because I'm looking at a child in an airport who is being trafficked, who had been taken from their parents, a refugee child. But if you notice, I say that I'm wearing, you know, I'm in the airport, it's first thing in the morning, my hair is up like this. Usually it's like up and like this, you know, like whatever. And, but I said, I'm a self-respecting Latina. And so I've got on my Selena lipstick, not the red one, but the other one that's more like el color de la piel. And I said, and I'm wearing my cashmere, which by the way was bought at, you know, a big box discount store because I never pay full price for anything. So that is the lead up to tell you that there are certain things that I will splurge on though. I splurge on my concealer. My concealer is Clé de Peau. Okay. Clé de Peau is a French, and it's, I'm going to reveal, it's very expensive. My concealer.
I'm gonna look into it because
it's very expensive. So please, you know, don't judge me. And I only started using Clé de Peau, whatever, you know, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, something like that.
No, I think it's great. I mean,
but when you order Clé de Peau, your expensive concealer on the internet, they send you free samples. And you know us Latinas, we're all about those free samples. So that's how I got this lipstick, because they sent me the free samples and I'm the one that's like scooping it out of the thing from the free sample thing. And I'm like, dude, you're going to have to actually, like right now I was like, es que no le puedes sacar más. But you have to do red lipstick for Erika. So I have to now splurge. I don't want to, it's expensive lipstick. So this is the reason why I haven't bought it, because I'm like, it's que you can't pay that much for a lipstick. So I'm not sure what I'm going to do because it's the first time. The Selena red works, but it's a little bit too early in the day to be wearing it. So I wear it a little bit darker. Also, Kat Von D has like some ridiculous vampire thing that I also like to do. But but yeah, I think I'm going to have to splurge now that you actually shouted me out for it.
I think you should. I mean, we're in a pandemic. Like, you got to feel good. I don't know. I still put on lipstick almost every day because otherwise I just feel depressed. So
wow.
I don't know what that is.
This is a big deal for me to put on lipsticks. And I still, Cannot seem to put on shoes there. Yeah,
I
cannot.
mean, I think shoes are overrated inside the house.
I don't know. I agree, but this is the longest time I've gone in my life without wearing high heels. And I don't know what I'm going to do. I better
yeah,
be.
I'm not. It's, yeah. I miss going out and being flirtatious in the world, like you mentioned.
Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Also,
Well,
you should read Esther Perel on
I,
on flirting and the importance of flirting and why flirting is an essential part of life, and that we in our relationships have got to let our partners flirt on the understanding that nothing is going to happen, and that they have to let us flirt, because flirting exists because of the contract of we're going to flirt, but you know and I know it's not going anywhere. And I was like, oh my God, I love this, because flirting is actually something that has to be in our lexicon. And as I've said to my students at DePaul, when you're a journalist, you have many tools in your tool belt. Flirting is one of them. It's not one it's not one I like to use. It's not, but there are times. And so
I'm going to look into that because I'm fascinated by this idea. Well, thank you so much for your time. This was really insightful, and I feel
adios, Alejandra. Bye, Lourdes. Adios, Eva. Erika, thank you so much. When you read the book and you said you loved it, it meant a lot to me. I was like, oh my God, Erika liked it. Oh my God, that's great. That's great.
Oh, of course. And
So
I'm
thank you
telling
so much.
everybody. So, yeah, I can't wait to read more. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.